Hey guys, Eric Smith here, Five Reasons Sports contributor, also co host of Scouting the Fins. And in today's video, we're going to take a look at Miami Dolphins' second round pick, number 37 overall, Jonah Savaiinaia. The Dolphins traded up from pick 48 to pick 37 to draft Savaiinaia, and the cost of going up was that they gave up pick number 48 and also pick number 98, which was at the end of the third round. And they also swapped Miami's pick number 135 for pick number 143. And when you look at that trade from a value perspective, according to the trade value chart, the Rich Hill trade value chart, Miami won that by 1 point. And also from the Jimmy Johnson trade value chart, Miami had +2 in terms of winning that trade. My list of guards who I felt were, without question, immediate upgrades and starters was shorter than most. There was a couple of tackles that I felt could convert and be fine. There were guys like Membow, Simmons, Banks, and Connerly, and they all went in the first round. Ariante Ursary was the next tackle on my board. He had a round 2 grade, but I didn't see him as a great option to convert to guard. And then when it came to guys that I projected primarily as guards, Will Campbell was at the top of the list with my only clear round 1 grade. And then he was followed by Tyler Booker and Donovan Jackson, who I had as fringe round 1 or 2 players, and then Gray Zabel solidly in round 2. The guards did end up going earlier than I thought, and all 4 of those were drafted in round 1. And that meant that Savaiinaia, who I had very close to Zabel with a round 2 pick, was the only offensive lineman left that I felt I had complete confidence could step in and start at guard opposite of James Daniels from day 1. So yeah, I had no issues at all with the trade value. After I do my own analysis, I have 3 draft guides that I use for additional tidbits. That would be the touchdown draft guide from Jake Brentall, the 2025 draft book from 3 Yards Per Carry's Simon Clancy, and then also the Beast from Dane Brugler. All 3 of those also had Savaiinaia as a second round pick. And having that kind of consistency in an opinion of a player is pretty rare for this year's draft. He played in a very pass-heavy offense at Arizona. They threw the ball almost twice as many times as they ran it while Savaiinaia was there. And from Simon's guide, has noted that he played approximately 1,000 snaps at right tackle, 350 at left tackle, and almost 1,000 at right guard. And Simon also notates that he could have round 1 interest for teams that have value in gap schemes. And I agree with that because I feel that, Savaiinaia can play well in zone schemes, but most of his eye-popping highlight plays when you look at the Arizona film occur when he's down blocking in gap schemes. Like Kenneth Grant, this is another monster of a man standing at 6'4", 325 pounds. And athletically, when you look at both as the linemen drafted into the Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel offenses, as well as the offensive lineman that Chris Grier has drafted in Miami since 2016, Savaiinaia really seems to be a perfect blend of the 2 visions. His strength and explosion numbers are all right in line for the range of both sets. And where he sets himself apart a little bit is the quickness that he can possess off the snap. I don't have the 10-yard splits for every Chris Grier pick, but Savaiinaia's 4.9540 is faster than the previous leader, which was Austin Jackson at 5.07. And 40s aren't that important for offensive linemen, but 10-yard splits are. And Savaiinaia had a 1.72 10-yard split, and that was tied for the fastest mark of any Shanahan or McDaniel drafted offensive lineman. And it's quite a bit quicker than guys like Aaron Banks at 1.91 and Dominic Pooney at 1.85, who were handpicked as the guards for the 49ers in 2024. Savaiinaia projects as a guard in the NFL, and he was announced that way in the draft. However, McDaniel and Grier did say at their press availability that they value his ability to kick out to tackle if needed. And while I think he's a far better fit at guard, the idea of having someone like Savaiinaia, who has played plenty of tackle in college, as an option to kick out to tackle should something happen to Patrick Paul or Austin Jackson makes me feel much better than the possibility of having to sit through another Jackson Carman game. As we get into the film review, I want you to keep a couple things in mind. Number one is that this film makes it difficult to show good examples of how Savaiinaia should project into the Dolphins' offense. Obviously, we're going to be looking at clips of him playing tackle, so I'm going to try to include more clips where he has a tight end lined up beside him to give a similar picture of what it will look like when he's got some bumpers on either side of him. And the other thing is they also run very little outside zone. I think according to PFF, it was around 5%, which when you look at the number of times they run the ball, comes out to about 15 snaps in 2024. And that's obviously something that Miami uses pretty often. So while there's plenty of good stuff to see, I think there's some uncovered potential in what he could do once he gets into this wide zone scheme and can really use that 10-yard split acceleration to create the horizontal displacement without having to be overly cautious like a tackle does playing on the edge of the box. All right, as we get into the film review here, let's start out with some down blocks from Savaiinaia. Like I said, this is something that he does really well. So this is going to be your power or gap or man schemes. Your counter scheme falls into that also. This a lot of times is when you're on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage from the player that's pulling, right? So if you're a guard, he's obviously a left tackle here, but if you're a guard, you'd be looking at a 2-eye, a 1, or a 0 technique that you're blocking down on. But as you can see here, right, Savaiinaia does a good job of getting into that defender. Would like to see him a little lower, but stays with it, affects that block by moving him over, and then does a good job of getting vertical and sealing off that linebacker at the next level. Next play here. So this time, Savaiinaia is on the right side, and as he steps down to block, this is the defender that he's initially going to be aiming for, but you can see that helmet is on the other side of the guard there, so he's not going to keep chasing that, and instead Savaiinaia is going to climb to the next level, latch onto a linebacker, and try to carry him upfield. Now, this is one thing that I'd like to see Savaiinaia improve on, is that when he gets to the end of blocks, right, sometimes he can kind of peak and not really finish the block. So, small thing there, easily fixable, but something to look for when we see the growth from Savaiinaia during his rookie season. Next one here, again at left tackle. So blocking down again, but this defender is not necessarily to the inside of him, but there is no immediate threat to the inside. So Savaiinaia can kind of slow play this, even though it's more of a head-up defender, right? And then he can try to torque him and then seal him to the inside. And that's exactly what you see here. This is basically a combo block between Savaiinaia as the left tackle and the tight end, but Savaiinaia takes care of that himself, and that allows that tight end to climb to the next level. Next one here, right tackle. Again, a little high, right? But hard to argue when you see the movement that he gets there. And he does a good job of reversing field there. That combination block is supposed to go over the top to number 12 over here, but off the snap of the ball, he's flowing over top. And Savaiinaia does a good job of not pushing that too far. We saw Patrick Paul do that a little bit last year. Savaiinaia does a good job not getting extended. He's able to turn, right? And you can see right there that lane is opening up. It's, some blocks from other places that resulted in the running back having to bounce that. But good job by Savaiinaia there on the down or combo block. Next one, left tackle here. So on this one, put this one on here because you can see that, even though he is a little high, and this is a smaller defender, right, but kind of stalemated there, and you can see that just a natural strength from Savaiinaia is able to keep his feet moving and continue to drive that defender down to the inside. Right tackle now, right, another good job of stepping down to this four technique defensive or three technique defensive tackle, right? Because he is the offensive tackle, right? So he is stepping down. This guy's kind of slow playing it to make sure that nothing comes to the inside there. Savaiinaia is going to spill that over, climb to the next level, seal that off, and you can see that that's a key block and a big run there. Next one here, almost an identical play. This time, don't have as good of a block on the kick out there. Right, this is essentially a long trap. Or I guess the trap was okay. It was the lead, right? An insert here that gets caught up and forces them to bounce it. But you can see that the wall that these two guys are developing here is exactly what you want to see from the offensive line perspective. And then last one for the down blocks here at right tackle. And you can just see, I mean, you know, we're starting here. Look at where the extra point marker is, right? And look at Savaiinaia and just how far he and everybody else finishes. I mean, he is basically just, you know, blacking out that entire side of the defense by taking his defender and running him down there. So lots of good clips there. Running back's got to be able to finish that with a linebacker in the hole. But this is certainly a strength that I see from Savaiinaia, and you can see in some of these clips the way that he's able to create that horizontal displacement that I think is going to carry over into the wide zone schemes as we watch him convert to a guard for the Dolphins. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is the backside of duo and the front side of inside zone. And those are usually the same type of blocks, especially in this offense where they're not a lot of times putting a tight end beside Savaiinaia. And, you know, where this doesn't apply to the Dolphins is that as a guard, you obviously have a tackle to your side. So you're never going to be the end man on the line of scrimmage on these plays. So for Savaiinaia here in 2024, I feel like he was a little limited in what he could do on these plays, right? Because if he goes sprinting off the ball the way that we like to see in this offense, and that defender slants to the inside, puts him in a pretty poor position. And, you know, with the inside zone stuff, that's typically going to hit your A-gap to A-gap area, right? So it's not as necessary to create that horizontal displacement on the edge. You just kind of want to seal them outside and then let the vertical displacement happen on the inside. So talking about the things that he does well with these front side of inside zones, his first steps are really good. You can see that first step opening up, seeing the hips open up towards the defender, and then he closes that gap really well. And then he also does a good job of, right, once that momentum stops, he's able to regain that momentum and create some secondary movement with it. Places that I'd like to see him improve is to eliminate the need for that secondary movement. And again, as he moves the inside and can be a little more aggressive with those type of blocks, you know, maybe you don't see him as tentative on contact. You know, he's not going to have to wait to make sure that he has position before he can restart his feet. I think that's something that we may see just improve naturally. The other thing is that, you know, he tends to let defenders get into his chest a little too much as a, you know, edge blocker on inside zone. And part of that may be by design, right? We talk about Patrick Paul and how he exposes his chest in pass protection, but he's such a mammoth human being that he can do that, and he's not going to get bull rushed into the play. I think maybe a little of that is the same way with Savaiinaia on these inside zone plays that, you know, even if he gives up his chest, most edge defenders are not going to be able to squeeze the play into the A-gap where it typically goes, and that allows him to keep his hands a little wider and just be able to control that defender. So lots of reps here. Like I said, somewhat applicable to the scheme, but I think that there are some aspects to it that make it difficult to translate exactly to what it's going to look like as a guard in the Dolphins' outside zone scheme. All right, let's talk about the front side of duo and the back side of inside zone. And these are going to look very similar. The biggest difference is that if it is inside zone, then the running back is going to start to the same side that the line is stepping. And if it is duo, then he's going to go to the opposite side, right? So watching, the line is going to the right, running back is going to the left. So this is duo, right? And not a great, split flow block there. But if we're watching Savaiinaia here at the left tackle position, right, as he gets off the ball here, you can see him really run more than he was on the front side of that inside zone stuff, right? And does a little better job keeping the feet moving, creating some displacement there, exactly what you want to see. Now on this one, he's here at the left side, right? And now it's more of a combo block, trying to seal and climb to a linebacker here. You can see that he gives a little bit of help, right? And then they work up to the linebacker together. Left side again here. And now we're getting a little more of a solo block. You can see that he's doing a solid job of getting to the inside there. Would like to see him continue to wheel around if he's going to seal that and really, sell the seal, as opposed to letting him escape over top there. Now he's on the right side, right? And now that one, Jackson Slater, when we had him on Scouting the Fins and talking about zone blocking and these combo blocks, what he told us that they were taught by the coaches is, in his words, right, don't fuck yourself to help your buddy, right? So as we're going through here, right, this is a combo block with this defensive end, but Savaiinaia knows that off the snap, right, that defensive end is not flowing, so he's not going to help. The tight end has to be able to take that because Savaiinaia can't help there and still be able to climb to the linebacker. So you can see him climb and attach to that second level defender. And that's why we're getting more of a immediate climb as opposed to a combo block. Now he's here on the right side. And now you can see that they are combo blocking that 3 technique on the backside of that inside zone. And the guard is not giving a ton of help. Savaiinaia is fitting into there and trying to work towards the front side. Would like to see the feet continue to move there, but into good enough position, right, as you can see, that creates enough of a lane for the running back to get through there. On the left side, very similar play. Little better job there of, getting around and keeping the feet moving, right? He's in good position here, right? Gets the hips around and then keeps the feet moving, creates some vertical displacement there. Left side again, right? Now that one, again, they are comboing this defensive tackle and this linebacker. They've got this split flow action that's coming across to take care of that defensive end. So because this linebacker is taking a minute to read, Savaiinaia is able to get in there and give a little help before he climbs and creates that lane for the running back to run through. Left side here, right? Now that one, an effort play, right? So this is essentially a 2 or a 2-eye technique defensive tackle. This is a really tough block to ask Savaiinaia to cut him off, but you can see at the effort to get to the inside, right? That defensive tackle, even though we're not getting a good block there, the defensive tackle can see what the goal of the offensive lineman is, and he is working to the inside and basically taking himself out, which creates the opportunity for a cutback lane, and you're still gaining, 4 yards on 2nd and 8 there. Left side, similar to what we've seen before, another 2-eye defensive tackle. He's not really doing much to get to the inside. Savaiinaia does a good job of getting to the inside and getting around. Ends up on the ground, not ideal, but can be far worse. Now, on that one, right, this is where this seal either has to happen right away. So this lane here is open, or we got to create some vertical displacement. Um, Getting driven down into the A gap, like I said, inside zone or duo is usually an A gap to A gap run. So, if we're looking where the mouse is here, you cannot get driven down into this area, and that's what happens there. And the running back has to bounce it completely and ends up getting tackled. Right side here, a little better job, probably better by the rest of the guys in Savaiinaia, right? Gets there, doesn't really get the hips around quickly, eventually finds it, and is able to anchor down and let the running back get through. But you can see room for improvement there, and that's maybe where the hands, right? This is where those hands to the outside, right? Maybe he's got the girth to not get driven back on a bull rush, right? But it's tough to create forward movement when the defender is in your chest. Couple more here. Again, right? Got to see the hips get around quicker. Probably in this one, we'd rather just see him try to create vertical push and just create something for the running back. Now that one there, a little bit of miscommunication, 4th and 1. Both those guys end up leaving the defensive tackle, and it doesn't really affect the play. And then last one here, another one where, getting into okay position, but, got to work on the technique to flip the hip, set the anchor, and just, stop that horizontal flow a little earlier. All right, let's look at outside zone. I know he said there was probably about 15 plays, and I didn't find 15, and this was literally the only one that I found that I would classify Savaiinaia being on the front side of outside zone, right? So as the ball snapped here, instead of just trying to seal that defender, you can see that they're running off the ball a little more. Had some miscommunication there on the inside. Definitely like the guard expected the center to flow over, right, and fill that gap because they end up basically letting that tackle go. But from Savaiinaia's perspective, you can see him running off the ball a little better. You can see, as opposed to that inside zone stuff, the feet are really continuing to run through, right? So, again, not a ton of this in this offense, right? But when you do see it, then you can, really see the flashes that can be there for it to translate to Savaiinaia in the Dolphins offense. All right, and then backside of outside zone, have 4 clips to go through here. The first 2 are similar, and the last 2 are similar. So right side of the line here, you're going to see him trying to cut off that defensive tackle. Again, would like to see a little better technique here. On the backside of outside zone, you really want to see not this arm to the outside. There's no reason for that. Should really be working underneath, working that left arm into the chest of that defender, right? Even, we saw a really good rep from, I think it was Gray Zabel in the Senior Bowl, right? As he ripped through there and just kind of sank his hips and almost backed into the defender. So, again, this is something they don't do very often, so not going to consider this a big negative. Ball is going way outside the other way. Really the minimal thing you need here is just not to let that defender get a free run in there. And, you see Savaiinaia doing that. And then, again, left tackle here, same thing. And you can see there, a little better job in the sense that, he's got that effort. He's running off the ball. We keep talking about that. Run off the ball. And when he runs off the ball, that defender's slanting to the inside. Well, that's fine, right? Just continue to wash him down to the inside. And that's what you see happening there. That even though you have a unblocked defender on the edge there, the horizontal displacement that we like to see in the outside zone running schemes, right, is creating enough space there that a running back should be able to run through a diving hand tackle and get a good gain there, but we still get something out of it just because of the movement that we can get on the backside of that. And these last 2 are really fun plays, right? So this is him at the right tackle. This is Savaiinaia using that 10-yard split, right? He's not covered to the inside. This defender is down in a two-eye or one technique. So Savaiinaia knows right away that he can just sprint off the ball, get to that linebacker, right? And these are the type of blocks here that, we see Aaron Brewer executing, but we saw Rob Jones, struggle with this a lot, being able to get to that second level defender. And that's where that 1.72 10-yard split really shines, because this is the type of block that can turn a, outside zone that's being called away from you, can turn it from a, 3 to 4 yard gain if that linebacker is still able to scrape over top and make the play, to now, right? If you get A-Chan out there and this guy's occupied, you got this guy coming onto the screen between him and a 51-yard touchdown. So that's something that I'm really going to be looking for as we watch Savaiinaia in the pros, is just his ability to climb to the backside on outside zones and be able to cut off the linebacker. And the last rep here for outside zone is going to be the same thing. Again, this is a two-eye technique, defensive tackle to the inside, right? Probably should have had a better job by the guard there of sticking with that. But you can see that Savaiinaia, as the left tackle there, is sprinting off the ball. I mean, he is aiming for that front side backer, not going to get there, but still able to catch the backside linebacker. And again, right, if we can get through the line of scrimmage on the front side here, I think it was, I think Isaiah Wynn in the 49ers game had a huge block that was very similar style to what we're looking at here. Just that ability to get to the second level, attach that linebacker, and just create options for the running back at the second level. All right, next thing we're going to look at here is Savaiinaia getting into space, right? So this is going to be your crack toss type plays, your screens. Sometimes you see a counter type play where they're pulling the guard and the tackle. And what you're going to find pretty frequently with Savaiinaia is that he can get into the open field and he can run really well. He can run, with the best of them as far as it goes for offensive linemen. But what you find at the point of contact is that there's still a lot of technique to work on. Screen pass here, you can see he's just kind of throwing a shoulder into the defender. Out here, leading out in front, he's going to whiff completely on that one. So again, not something they asked him to do a lot. So I'm sure this is not something that they worked on in practice a ton. But you can see the potential there, right? He's getting out into the open field. He's able to stay in front of the running back. He's able to get to the defender. Just got to see a little bit cleaned up there when he gets to that point of contact of being able to settle his feet down and get attached to those open field defenders. And then last thing we're going to look at in the running game is when he is pulling and kicking. We only got 3 reps here, and 2 out of the 3 are good, or one's good, one's okay, which is that one. And then this last one you're going to see is not as good. This kind of goes back to the hybrid of wide zone and open field blocking, right? The shorter pulls where the defender doesn't have a lot of room to work, like on that first one there, and that one, right? He's better, right? He's able to initiate that contact when the defender doesn't have a lot of room to move. He's able to create movement. But when we're going a little wider distance, right, and working on a target that's a little more athletic or moving a little more, then you don't have quite the same success. This is not something the Dolphins do a lot in the run game. They do pull the guards a lot in the pass game, but I think Savaiinaia will be okay in that perspective. I think it's more when he is pulling and trying to run block that some of these issues can pop up. But again, these are the type of things that you can fix, right? He's got things that you can't teach, right? And the things that he needs to improve on are the things that, it's realistic to see them improve the same way that Patrick Paul did, from when he was drafted till when he hits the field next season. All right, let's get into some of the pass blocking stuff. We're going to talk about the good reps first, right? And you're going to see that a lot of them look the same in the sense that they are more vertical sets as opposed to the ones where he has to kick out into space. And a lot of these are going to be ones that he has a tight end beside him. And that's something we talked about early in this video, is trying to find reps that are going to replicate what he's going to see at guard. And at guard, you're not going to see him like this, having a lot of those wide sets, nice snatch there, pulling that defender to the ground. But you don't see him getting bull rushed very often. Does a good job of anchoring and protecting the pocket. And that's actually something that Mike McDaniel said during their press availability. The quote from him was, setting the pocket in protection is something that he, being Savaiinaia, is very skilled at. Well, he said very, very, twice skilled at. Right? And I agree with that. When you look at preventing pressure up the middle, you need those bigger guards that can anchor down, especially with a guy like Brewer beside them. And that's what you're getting in Savaiinaia, is a guy that doesn't give up a ton of space vertically when he's pass protecting. He can get into some issues when he's getting wider, and we'll look at some of those later. But when you watch these clips of the good pass protection, you see shorter sets. One of the things that I really noticed with him, and he talked about it in his own press availability, is that pass protection is not passive. And a lot of these times you'll see that Savaiinaia is the one who is initiating contact with the pass rusher. And I think that's where a lot of young guys get into trouble, is that they kind of sit back and try to react to what the pass rusher is doing. And with Savaiinaia, you see really good hand usage and being able to initiate that contact. He's not sitting back and letting that edge defender decide how he's going to address Savaiinaia. Savaiinaia is usually getting that, like right there, getting that outside hand into the chest or neck area of the defender, and making him change his plan or commit to his plan earlier than he wants to. And then something else I think that Savaiinaia does really well that's going to translate favorably to guard is just his ability to pick up and react to stunts. You see it over and over again that he's patient in his set, right? He can read that defender and he's able to react to it. And, you see often, whether it's a tackle nose stunt or whether it's a tackle end stunt, you see those loopers. And, in the past, we've seen them get free rushes against the Dolphins. But I think that's something that, even as a rookie, I think that Savaiinaia is going to come in early and show a good ability to, react to that, whether he's playing on the left or the right side. I think this is going to be a strength of his to be able to, maintain that pocket composure with a good anchor, those patient sets, and just reacting to the stunts. And then the last film review that we're going to do is going to be the poor pass blocking reps. And, a lot of these are reps that are going to be basically eliminated just by the fact that he's playing inside, right? You can see that he's blocking on this play, blocking a wide 9 defender. You can see that he has to widen that pass set, opening up the inside, shoulders are opening up, and then that defender is spinning to the inside and creating pressure on the quarterback. So this is the type of thing that when you're the guard, right, this basically gets eliminated, and we're not going to see Savaiinaia having to deal with a, more of a twitchy edge rusher, getting him into space and then spinning back to the inside. Kind of a similar rep here. Obviously a passing situation because all the defensive linemen are lined B gap or wider. So this is going to be Savaiinaia trying to get out to this edge defender. Again, trying to get way out there wide. You can see the feet aren't as patient as what we saw on the good pass blocking reps. And he ends up getting overset a bit too far. Ends up getting beat to the inside because of it. And that's, just one of those limitations. When you're not the, quickest in terms of your pass sets, right? And you have a guy this wide, you really have to worry about him turning the corner and coming off the edge. I mean, that's the last thing you want. But the trade-off for that is that you almost have to overcompensate, and that's what happens here where the defensive end is able to take advantage of that. Next one here on the right side. So, I said before he doesn't get bull rushed very often, and, this is one of those few examples. But when you look at it again, look at how quickly he has to try to get out of it. The feet are much more rushed than when he's able to sit and have a short pass set. That contact's not happening until almost 6 yards into the backfield. And basically the defensive end just beats him to the spot, and Savaiinaia is not able to get his feet set and anchored down. Now he's able to get there and not just give up a free rush, right? But when we talk about the rare times that he does give up a bull rush, it's in situations that you're not going to see once we move him to the inside as a guard. Right side again here, wide defender. And very similar to that second one, right? You have to defend the edge out there. You can see him widening that. You can see looking at where he starts is 2 yards outside of that hash, right? Watch that left foot and just watch how wide he gets from there. Look at all that space created just by the pass set. And that defender does a good job of taking advantage of that, right? And, Savaiinaia is not afraid to use his hands to protect his quarterback. And you can see that there, gets a little wide, gets that left hook in there, and kind of on the edge of getting called for holding, right? But if he's better from the starter, just not asked to do that, then we don't even have to worry about that. And then last one here. So again, right, it's always the same thing on the reps that he loses in pass rush, right? He has to widen out further. That end, right, look at where he starts out, right? Just use the logo as a reference there, the corner of the Y, right? And then look at where he is when he finally wins a rep. Like he's almost all the way out to the kickoff marker there, right? So that's a 5-6 yard difference that you're asking Savaiinaia to get out there. And in that case, he's just not able to get out there far enough. Doesn't give up the inside like he did earlier, but because he's a little more patient in that set, right now he gives up that outside edge, and that defender's able to turn the corner. Thankfully, it's a quick pass. Doesn't matter. But it is what it is, right? This is situations you don't want to put him into. And we do the same thing with Austin Jackson, right? So if it comes to a scenario where we have to put Savaiinaia at tackle, the Dolphins are adept at not asking their tackles to block like this without getting the ball out quickly. So not a huge issue even if he was playing tackle, but pretty close to a non-issue as a guard. Okay, so that was probably close to 30 minutes of film review that we did. And if you stuck through the whole thing, really appreciate that. Try to do a good job of showing some of the things that Savaiinaia does well as some of the things that, we can look for improvement on as he continues through his rookie contract. Everything that I see that is an issue is stuff that is fixable, right? Like I've said a couple of times now, he has the stuff that you can't teach, right? And he's a captain. That's what that C is on the chest, right? And every time you hear this guy talk, right, you can tell that he loves the game and that he's going to work to improve. The stuff that he does not do well, right, is stuff that's either going to be covered up by moving him into guard, or it's just stuff that Arizona didn't do that much, and we should expect a pretty early improvement just because he'll be working it more with the Dolphins. I expect Savaiinaia to step in day one and be the starting guard opposite of James Daniels. I expect him to be a above average pass protector as a guard from day one. I expect him to be able to set that pocket and keep the front of the pocket clean for Tua to operate. And then in the running game, right, I expect a little bit of up and down. I think that we're going to see some highlight type plays from him as he starts to get his feet under him. But I think there, could be some growing pains there as well. But, this is a player that if you are patient with him, you're going to get a solid starter from day one. And if you continue to see the development as he works through year 2 and 3, definitely has the Pro Bowl type ceiling. So, as many people have said, this is a very high floor, high ceiling pick. I think Miami did an excellent job in trading up and getting their guy, getting the last guard that I had, that I'm confident being a day one starter. And I'm really looking forward to going into training camp and knowing exactly who the starting five is for the Dolphins offensive line, which is something we haven't seen for a while. So, as always, appreciate you guys watching. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of this pick, and we'll talk